Hi everyone, I'm Jane from Pandemonium Art Gallery, and today I'm going to teach you how to paint this. I'm painting this on a 12 by 16 inch stretched canvas, and I'm using Liquitex Basics acrylic paint, and you can find a full materials list in the description below. So let's get started. For this painting, I'm going to be using a 1-inch flat brush for the background, a 1/2-inch angle brush, a small round brush, and then a small liner brush. And the colors I'm using are titanium white, primary blue, Mars black, hooker's green, yellow oxide, and cadmium orange hue. So I'm going to start by just using this little mister bottle and lightly wetting the surface of the canvas. That's going to help me make sure that I get my paint spread nice and smooth. My brush is a little bit damp, and I'm just spreading that water all the way around. So now I'm going to start adding my light source here in the center, and I'm going to do that by picking up quite a bit of white and a little bit of blue. So my brush stroke is really controlled. Every brush stroke overlaps the previous one. And I'm not worried about blending these colors in. I'm just worried about covering the canvas. That's it. I'm not worried about the direction of my brush strokes. I'm just trying to break it up and give it a real scattered light feel. Expand it a little wider right here. I still have white on my brush, and I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to pick up some blue, and I'm going to start just outside of that white and go right into it. And again, see, I'm painting really quick, but my brush strokes are very controlled. They're random, but they're not flailing all over the place. Now I'm just lightly dusting over that break between the two colors, so that it's not such a hard transition. And if I feel like it's still too hard of a transition, then after I've added all of the blue, I can go back with a little bit more white and break that line up a little bit more, and I think I'm gonna do that. Okay, so now I'm just gonna wipe off a little of that extra, pick up some more white, and go right over the center again, into the blue, really randomly. Feather where the two colors meet. If I continue to push hard where those colors meet, I will continue to lay down paint, and then I'll lose one of the colors. Either the blue will get too light, or I'll drag too much blue into the white. So that's why I'm using just the end of my brush right there where those two colors meet, not pressing it flat. When you press it flat, you lay color down. When you use the end of the brush, you smooth colors together. All right, I just wiped off my brush a little bit, and now I'm gonna pick up green. And maybe a little bit of blue. I'm gonna start at the bottom here. I want the bottom to be pretty green. And I'm not gonna worry about feathering the green into the blue as much as I worried about feathering the white into the blue. I'm gonna let those two colors be a little more separate, because the blue is more like the background, the sky or the air, or things in the distance that are too far away to really have much focus. The green is more of the undergrowth that is surrounding our flower. So it's okay if these colors don't blend. And again, I'm just using the very tip of the brush, pushing a little harder at the edge to lay down some green, and then a little softer to smooth it out, rather than ending with that hard line. Up this other side here. A lot of times people get frustrated when their paintings don't look exactly like mine when I'm teaching them how to paint something, but that's okay, because the thing is that my paintings never look exactly like mine after I'm done with them either. I never paint the same thing the same way twice. It's always gonna look different. Now I'm gonna take a little bit of black, just a little bit. You see that? It's just on the corner. And I'm gonna feather it in through the bottom here to give it a little bit of a darker vignette type feel. Not covering all of the green, just a little bit, feathering back and forth just with the end of the brush. But in quick strokes, that helps you get a smooth transition so you don't have those hard lines from the end of your brush. Random directions. If you do it all just like that, it's gonna look like it's being forced upwards, but if you kind of break it up, some point up, some point down, some point inwards, and you just get a little bit of a more natural feel. So now I'm gonna let this dry completely, and once it's dry, we'll come back and we'll start putting our flower in. Now we're gonna draw out the stems of our flower, and I'm using this 1/2 inch angle brush, and I'm gonna use this Hooker's Green. So my angle brush is wet, and then I wiped it off on the edge of the jar a couple of times. Just get a little bit of green on each side, making sure that I keep my brush flat. Now, a trick to using these angle brushes is that you always want to drag this long tip. So if you're painting from the bottom up, you're gonna angle it like that, so that tip drags as you go up. If you're going from the top down, turn it around so that tip points up and drags. Otherwise, if you go into the tip, you'll smash it and you'll lose control of the shape of your line. And I'm just gonna start all the way at the bottom here. I'm putting very light pressure on my brush, and I'm just gonna sketch out the main line. And then I'm gonna have a second kind of a bud coming off of it. And then I'll probably have a swirl coming off right about there. I'll have a leaf there and another one right there. Now we can thicken it out. I'm gonna get a little bit more paint. I'm gonna start at the top, so the tip is pointing up. I'm gonna start here, put a little more pressure on it so I get a nice thick, solid line. If you're having a hard time getting your paint to spread evenly or consistently, then you can wet your brush a little bit more before you get more paint. Let's draw the leaves. So I did wet my brush a little bit more here. And the leaves can look like whatever you want them to look like. I want kind of a delicate shape that swoops in and back out. And then I'm gonna fill that in with green. Don't worry if it's transparent right now. You can see the background through it. You're gonna add so many layers of paint here that it won't even matter. It will be covered, I promise. Pretty much just drawing this with the tip, the long tip, not the entire flat edge. Just really simple but delicate shapes. So now I'm going to switch to this brush to do the swirl. And I've wet this brush as well. And when I go into the paint, I'm going to turn it to make sure that I keep that point. I want to make sure that this stays nice and round. I don't want to flatten it out. To draw this swirl and make sure that I have control over both the pressure so that it doesn't get fat and then skinny and then fat again, And to make sure that I have complete control over the shape of it, I'm gonna put my hand on my canvas, or at least just one finger. And I'm not gonna start right where I want it to come out, because then I feel like I get too much of an angle. So I'm gonna start down into the stem and swoop up. And notice that I'm letting my fingers draw the shape. My hand is stationary. It's my fingers that are moving. My hand is sitting on my canvas, and my fingers are drawing the shape. Okay, now I'm gonna move back to the angle brush, and we're gonna start drawing the flowers. For my flowers, I'm gonna use a tiny bit of this gold color. This is yellow oxide, and I'm gonna mix it in with the white, just so I have a super pale version of the yellow. Now the main flower, the shape that I'm gonna draw initially is kind of a big elongated U. So I'm gonna start up here. Again, I'm putting my hand on the canvas, and I'm just using the tip of the brush. I'm just dragging the very tip of the brush. And I'm gonna start up here and draw a U. And basically this stem is gonna be the balance point. You want to make sure that you always know where this point is, where the stem meets the flower, because all of your petals are going to connect there. If you lose sight of that and your petals start connecting off to the sides, then your flower will look lopsided. You'll have really long fat petals on one side and short stumpy petals on the other. I'm just going to grab a little more of this yellow, mix it with a little more white, and I'm going to draw petals. So I'm going to start up here and kind of make a football shape that ends at my stem. And if your petals end up being too skinny, you can fatten them out again, because you're gonna paint over all of these lines and you can redefine them later. You're not gonna see any of those lines. So feel free to refine this flower as you go. And you can add as many petals as you want. See, again, that one ends at the center there. I'm making each of these, the tips of these petals, each about a little over a ½ inch apart. And it doesn't matter which ones are in front of which ones, because you're gonna redefine all of that once you start doing the highlights and the color definitions. Now we're gonna draw our bud. And the bud is almost like an upside down teardrop shape. So I'm gonna have the bottom of it be right there. And I think I want it to end about there. And I want it to also have kind of a curvy, graceful shape, kind of like the leaves. I'm gonna mix up a little bit more of my gold with my white, and I'm just gonna fill these shapes in. If you watched my Midnight Raven video, you basically understand what we're going to be doing here. And what that is we're going to layer lots of colors to create shadows and highlights and color variations. So my main color I'm going to be using is white, but then I'm going to also just pick up some of this yellow, and I'm going to start defining the petals. And while I'm doing this, I can decide which petal's on top, which petal cuts behind other ones. If the color that I put on is too intense, I can add a little bit more white to push that back and soften it. So I'm gonna start with this one. And I've got the white and the yellow, and I'm gonna cut down around the edge here. Just start adding some of those yellow lowlights to it. to smooth out that line a bit and bring it in. I'm using the flat part of the brush too to kind of swoop the color into the flower. And I think right here in the middle, I'm gonna get just white on the end of the brush. And I'm gonna push a little bit harder to make a nice bright white spot. And you can grab a little bit of this cadmium orange and swoop it through there. Blend it a little. If I think that orange is too overpowering, the yellow will help to soften it a bit. And just keep adding it wherever you feel like it needs to go. I'm gonna actually put a little bit on the end here. And you can blend this as much or as little as you want. You can make some pretty solid lines with your colors. You can make them really soft and blended. I'm gonna do a little bit of both. If you feel like the color got too blended or you just don't like it overall and you're having a hard time blending out what you don't like, that's not an issue. Just let it dry completely. Come back and paint over it. Get some of my yellow. Start defining the edge of some of these petals. I decided that I want this one that I just took that line down for to be in the background. So I'm gonna come across like that and see how it pushed it to the back. Right and wrong way here. I think just do them however feels really interesting to you. It doesn't matter which one's in the front or which one's in the back. Get just white, but with the yellow and the orange on my brush still, it's not going to be pure white. See, I'm just making lines. I'm not trying to blend these colors at this point, just making lines of color. And add in some of that gold if I feel like I've lost it. I'm actually going to wipe off some of that and grab a bit of this orange here. That's pretty intense, but I'm not afraid of it. Don't be afraid of it. Nothing is permanent. A little bit of extra white, just kind of slashing over top of it where I feel like it's too heavy. Really lightly, my brush is putting very little pressure on the canvas right now. Very little pressure. Clean off this brush. So my brush is cleaned off. I'm gonna get just solid white, trying really hard not to get any of that yellow orange mixture in there. I just want white. And I'm gonna give some pretty heavy highlights in there. I'm gonna let that white be a little bit chunkier. Not throughout the whole thing. I'm not painting over everything I just did. I'm just adding some little slashes of the color here and there. So I know our flower looks kind of goofy right now. It's kind of just stuck onto this little tiny stick. So we're gonna work on our stem again. So I've got my round brush. and my green paint, the Hooker's green. And we're gonna widen the stem at the top just a little bit. Flowers are, for the most part, dry at the bottom here where we're gonna add the green. So I've got my round brush and my green paint. Again, I'm trying to keep that brush in a nice sharp point. And I'm gonna come up into the flower. I'm gonna start on the edge here and just draw a little bit of a line. And it's okay if it goes outside of the flower a bit, because it's a different part. It's you know, the little green open bud part. So it would poke out from the flower a little. It doesn't have to be right inside of the flower. But I'm gonna keep it a little bit more narrow and not as many. I'm gonna actually bring this one up just a little farther. So let's go ahead and start highlighting the stem. In the stem, I also used the orange and the gold. And this is where it may seem a little bit scary to you, and it's okay, don't be afraid. Because just like with the petals, if I feel like the highlights are too much, I can take them back with the green. So I'm gonna get some gold, and I'm just gonna start kind of swiping down the edge in places. I'm just gonna move it around kind of randomly. I'm not trying to re-highlight or redraw the stem all the way. Cleaning off my brush, I'm gonna go get a little bit more green and swoop down the side that I didn't highlight very lightly, and see that helps to blend the gold in a little bit. And that way I can kind of kick back those areas where I may have added too much gold. What it's also doing is filling in the green, so now the green is gonna start being less transparent. Another thing you can do to really amp up the highlight is grab a little bit of white and just very gently put it here and there. You don't want a lot of white, but a little bit is fun. And I'm okay getting it a little heavier because I'm gonna come kick it back again. Some people have issues with painting real freely like this and letting the colors mix on the brush, kind of giving up that control. But I feel like you get really great effects when you give up a little bit of control. That one kind of got away from me, so I'm swiping some green over top of it. My gold that I lost. You really can just infinitely add these colors. And just paint over it. start over completely if it gets away from you. Just let it dry and then paint over it. So I have a clean brush, and now I'm going to start getting some of this cadmium orange. Not a lot. I'm going to wipe off a lot of that, and I'm going to pick up a little bit of gold so this orange isn't too terribly bright. And in the areas where I have a lot of gold is where I'm going to put this orange. And if it's too orange, pick up a little gold, kick it back with that. If the yellow is too much, just pick up a little green and kick that back with that. This should not be a stressful way to paint. This should be a very freeing way to paint. I tend to be a little bit of a control freak. Just ask my husband. But this is a really good way to let some of that control go. You know, you're letting the paint kind of decide what it's going to do. Don't try and micromanage it and force it to be something else. Clean off my brush again real quick. And now I'm gonna go for a little more green. Soften up some of these highlight areas where I lost some of my green. I might even add just a tiny touch of white. Just some of the green areas. Just the tiniest. Can you see I'm just barely, I have the tiniest speck of white on the end of the brush there. Oops. My hand got a little paint on it and I got it on my canvas. So let me show you how to erase that real quick. I've got my angle brush and it's all cleaned off. I'm gonna dry it off on my paper towel really good. This works really well if you catch it immediately. If it gets dry, then it won't work. So now my brush is pretty dry, just paper towel dry, and I'm gonna lightly scrub up into it. Wipe it on my paper towel. And just scrub at it again. So we're going back into the green with the tiniest touch of white. Because these colors are so contrasting, it lends itself well to being kind of messy and abstract, right? Because this is not really how flowers are colored anyway. The fact that we're using these colors. So wherever you choose to highlight them is completely up to you. And however you choose to highlight them, whether it's really heavily or really softly. Right now I'm really going over with the green and a tiny bit of white to some of the areas that I left green that I feel like are too transparent. pretty happy with the way that looks. While the flower dries, we are gonna add just some really abstract little grasses and flowers down in this area. And what I'm gonna do is use my angle brush. It's damp and just wiped off on the edge of the jar. And I'm gonna pick up some green on one side. And I'm gonna pick up some of my leftover blue on the other side. I want this to be pretty dark, and I want it to kind of, I don't want it to stand out too much from the bottom. So I'm gonna start by holding my brush with the angle pointing down, and I'm just gonna swipe upwards and make some grasses. The harder I push, the fatter my grasses are gonna be. Just really kind of random shapes. They don't have to come all the way from the bottom. It's really interesting if you make them go in all different directions. If you painted my cattails video before, then you've probably done similar brush strokes. We do this exact same thing in the cattails video, just with black. I'm gonna clean off this brush again. And I grabbed one extra color that I didn't have before. This is Alizarin Crimson. So I'm gonna load up my angle brush with this red, and we're gonna do some very simple, very, very simple flowers. I'm gonna take this, my angle brush with the point up. I'm just gonna choose a random grass, and it doesn't even have to be attached to a grass. And I'm just gonna push like that. Another one like that. And one in the center. The harder you push, the bigger your flower is going to be. So if you want a really big one, just push harder like that. And this one I didn't push very hard, so it's smaller. Okay, now the last thing we're going to do is take this little liner brush, and we're going to add some little black lines to give a little bit more definition. So this brush is very, very small, a size 0, and I have a drip of water. Do you see that little drip of water? I'm gonna place it right there and just mix it with a little bit of black paint. So this paint is about as thick as ink. It's pretty thin, but it's not totally watery. First, I'm gonna draw some of the little curly lines. They're just little abstract feathery lines. I'm putting my hand on my canvas, but I'm gonna do this fairly quick and in one stroke. So I'm gonna go start there. Like that. And where it feathered out, you can just grab a little bit more and lightly go back over it. If you find that you're having a hard time getting that paint to spread at all, then your brush is too dry. So just grab another drip of water, bring it over to here, and mix in some black paint. And I think I'll do another one up here. And then I'm just gonna add some little definition lines here and there, maybe down the part of the edge of that leaf, and maybe one inside. Define which petal is in front. I'm not outlining every petal, and I'm not outlining the full petal of the ones that I am outlining. These are more just like accent marks. And I just add them wherever I feel like a line has been lost a little bit. I don't even really care if these lines match up perfectly, if they're a little outside like this one or a little inside. Now this one I feel like it got away from me. So let's take care of that. Washed off my angle brush, dried off of my paper towel a bit. And then just like before, I'm gonna kind of scrub up into it. I'm gonna add a few of those little lines in these flowers, just a couple, just kind of randomly. I'm gonna add a little white too. So I'm just gonna add a couple into these guys to give them just a little bit more separation from the background. And then let's add some little baby's breath type deals. We're gonna use the end of the brush. I'm gonna dip it straight into the white paint. Get off a little of that excess paint. And we'll go just lightly touch that to the canvas here and there. I like to do them in almost like little cone shapes so it looks like it's coming off of one little plant. I'm not gonna add very many. I think I'll only add 3, just 2 on one side and 1 on the other. Maybe I will take a little of this white and just add a couple little highlights. Grab some black again. And kick it back. I'm going to add just a few more of these little dots. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and feel free to share your finished product with me. You can post a link in the comments below, or you can email an image to me at pandemoniumartgallery@gmail.com. And you can even share it on my Facebook page. The link to that is in the description, as well as a full materials list. So go make some art today.